Hello and welcome back to the Brit Iron podcast. This is episode 10 in our season preview and individual team rankings, and today is the number 23 team, the Arizona Cardinals. And of course today, joined by my good friends Matt and Sam. How are we today, guys?
Cracking, mate. Got there in the end. Got there in the end with that intro. took us a while to work on it, but
That wasn't strictly my fault. I just like to
I
add,
think it's fair to say you stuck the landing with that one.
A little bit of a cut and edit to make on that one, but we move.
Yeah, there was a few failed attempts, but yeah. But today, Arizona Cardinals, a very exciting team. Sam, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I want to start. I want to talk about what I think is a brilliant job by Steve Keim of surrounding Kyler Murray with just some amazing talent. I think GM is a really tricky spot to be in the league. Everyone always gives, if the team has got any problems going on, the GM's one of the first people that gets blamed. Like, well, you didn't put enough talent around the guy, or this, that, like, this is your fault, your job to create a team, and you've done nothing. And he's quietly put together some insane weapons on offense. Made a very shrewd move to ship David Johnson off and get rid of that kind of ridiculous deal that he was on. Yeah. That I think it was a cap hit of $16 million, which is just horrific, and they don't want to be dealing with that. And when you've got Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds in that backfield, you, as much as I really like David Johnson, think he's a really talented guy, you don't need him for that kind of money there. And to be able to get rid of him and bring in D-Hop is pretty ridiculous. When, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is probably the best receiver in the game. They'll be the Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I was gonna say top two.
They'll be the Michael Thomas thing, but I think DeAndre Hopkins has got an edge for me on Michael Thomas. So I think you're bringing in an amazing receiver, shipping off a dodgy deal. You've still got Christian Kirk, who in my opinion is primed to kind of make that jump to really establish himself as a top tier guy in the league.
Yeah.
Larry Fitzgerald, who's still got gas in the tank. And then they've got a number of ancillary pieces around there. Players like Andy Isabella, who are just big play monsters. They've got the speed. They've really got a lot around Kyler here. The one thing I would say is I'm still not massively keen on that O-line. But Kyler Murray is the kind of player who he might turn into a Russell Wilson 2.0 and able to kind of make things happen without the O-line. So offensively, I think this team looks like it could be poised to make a real leap this year.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think, as you said, it's just the O-line, which I think will be the next step for them. But I think the reason I think that we've got them a bit lower is, one, a little bit of time for everything to mesh. Still, a lot of that talent is young. Outside, obviously, Fitz and D-Hop of that, they're still sort of maturing into it. But also the defensive side of the ball. They were, last season, I think, in quite a few stats across the board, one of the worst defenses in the league. And now they've brought in some pieces. Isaiah Simmons, who's someone I was really high on going to the draft. He's the kind of guy that if you need to improve almost an entire defense, or almost across the board, you bring him in because he can play or he has in college played so many positions. Wait and see how he gets used in the NFL. But I think he's going to really help that defense to start to take a step. And then maybe next year's draft, a little bit of O-line talent, a few more pieces in the defense. And I think within 2 to 3 years, we'd be talking about the Cardinals later, quite a bit later in this list. But I think it's very promising for them there. And I think for me, you mentioned Kyler Murray. I'm very high on him coming into this season. I think he really could take a step this year again. And if he builds on what he did last year and improves, it's going to be very fun to watch.
The thing I love about Kyler, just touching what you were saying there, Matt, is he has got the uncanny ability that a lot of quarterbacks don't have. And he can sense when somebody's around him, and he knows when to get down. He will avoid hits. He gets down well. He slides well. Obviously, that baseball background coming in. I really like him for the next 4, 5, 6 years, because I think he can do exactly what Russell Wilson does, and he can just stay on the field, which I think is going to be huge for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, for me, overall, looking at this offense, I think it's a very, very exciting team. We mentioned Kyler Murray. I think he's an electric player, a lot of potential. I think we're really going to see him push on this year. Touching the running back room there, it's a bit small. There's only 3 players there. But, I mean, I have no queries over Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, and even Eno Benjamin as well, who they drafted this year is quite exciting. And obviously wide receivers touching it as well. There's a lot of talent in that room. My one concern would be the tight end room. I don't really see an out-and-out sort of playmaker in that room. So if I was to criticise the offense on the offensive weapons, that might be my one criticism there. They've got Max Williams and Dan Arnold, and I'm not really that high on those guys personally.
The thing I think that does entice me about their tight end room is the fact that because they've got so many other weapons at wide out and running back, realistically from their tight end, they're not necessarily going to be looking for someone who is going to be 1,000-yard receiver. Their requirement from the tight end could well just come from they need someone who can get the job done in the red zone when it comes to receiving. And they've got a lot of big tight ends. I mean, you've got Max Williams at 6'4", you've got Dan Arnold at 6'5", Ryan Becker at 6'4". That's big targets. That's the kind of thing that you stick it up where only your guy can get it, and either your big tall tight end comes up and brings it down, or they don't. So, I mean, I wouldn't be going out and saying that I like any of these tight ends going forward, but they've got big-bodied guys who, if they can come in and get a job done, which 5-6 touchdowns on the season, that's all that they would need out of that tight end room when you then look at their receiver core and their running back core.
Yeah, I think for me, slight fantasy spin on it on that tight end room. In our dynasty, I picked up Dan Arnold. I think over a dynasty league, I could see him developing. I think for this year, depending on how the offense plays, I could see him getting potentially the right kind of red zone targets to have sort of a streaming value. He's not going to be someone you put in, week out, I don't think yet. But I think he's a guy that if you start, if you've got maybe Kittle, Kelsey, something like that, they're on a bye, you could put him in for that 1 week. A guy that if it's a bit thin on the ground, because I know our dynasty league, its tight end is very thin on the ground. It's very hard to come across it. So I've got him in just because if he starts to emerge throughout the year and there's just a good week where it looks like a great matchup, he's the kind of guy I'd be comfortable playing, but only if he does kind of kick on and sort of bring himself out as if they're throwing to a tight end, it's him. I think if it's a 50-50 kind of throw up between a couple of them, then it might be something to avoid. But I think it's someone to watch out for. And maybe in dynasty drafts, if really late on, you see him there and you've got one of the big tight ends already, don't think, I won't. But it's someone to keep an eye out for. There could be some value there, I think, personally.
Yeah, for sure. Sticking on the fantasy front, Sam, I know you mentioned Christian Kirk earlier. Where would you be looking to draft him in a sort of fantasy league?
That's an interesting question, actually, because I really like D-Hop and Christian Kirk going forward from a football sense when you're just watching the tape, and I think they're both great receivers. D-Hop is the clear number one on that guy on that team, but this could kind of become a situation where you've got a 1A and a 1B, because I think Kirk is good enough to be a 1 on most teams. He's just happens to find himself on a team where he's got a generational receiver on the other side from him. Now, I think what you might see is a slight decrease in targets for Kirk, but I think from the same standpoint, you're going to see a decrease in targets for a D-Hop for what we expect from him, because there is so many mouths to feed on that offense. And when D-Hop was in Houston, he was the clear-cut number one, absolutely no competition in terms of could there be a 1A, 1B scenario. So I think I would be wary of drafting D-Hop in that kind of first round, just because that's where he's going to go. Okay. You get to the end of that first round, I'd be wary of that, because I think I'd rather take, in that situation, a Michael Thomas, the guy who is clear-cut going to be the 150 targets. Whereas it wouldn't surprise me if it gets to the end of the season and you've got D-Hop on 120 targets and Christian Kirk on 110. And kind of the fact that you've got Kirk being so good there takes away some of D. Hopkins' targets. So I think Christian Kirk could be a real value in that kind of 6th, 7th round. Once you're through through the top tier running backs and receivers, and then you're middling through getting through the next load of starters. Christian Kirk could be a kind of guy who goes under the radar, and I would keep an eye on him from the 5th round on, really.
Yeah, I think 100% agree with that. I think one interesting thing potentially you could see is if teams really try and focus in on D-Hop, put him in double coverage, things like that, the way the Cardinals love running your sort of 4 wide receiver sets, heavy throwing packages like that, you might see Kirk getting a good bit of space here and there and being able to just kind of, especially early in the season, slip under the radar and where everyone's expecting just everything to be like D-Hop, D-Hop, D-Hop. Next thing you know, Kirk's in some space and he's gone. So I think that's one thing I think could see potentially, less targets, but more efficient when he is targeted.
Yeah.
I think another player to bring it onto for me, sort of on the other end of that conversation, is Kyler Murray. And I think, as I've already said, I really think he'll take a step, and I also think that in a fantasy sense as well. I think for me, he's in that sort of, especially in Dynasty, but even for me this year in one-season leagues, obviously you're going to have Jackson and Mahomes going 2nd or 3rd round. Sometimes if people are really high on him, I've seen him in mocks recently going in the 1st. It really depends. I wouldn't draft either of them in the 1st.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, that's a reach. But they're going that sort of 2nd or 3rd round range. Once you sort of get towards the 5th, 6th, is where I've been seeing Murray go, and where I think that's value for him. I think if he develops how it looks, he feels like he's on track to, with everything that's around him, I think that's a good place to take him. I think if you want to take one of those, if you prioritise quarterbacks early, he's one you should be looking at if you don't want to do it as early as the 2nd or 3rd. You can still get good value for a quarterback all the way through. Like I've seen Jared Goff going in the 12th round of 12-man leagues quite consistently, which I think for me, he's a bounce-back guy. But if you really want to prioritise it and get an electric talent as your fantasy quarterback, Kyler Murray in the 5th or 6th, if he's there, happily snag him up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more happy to stream quarterbacks, and he would one that would be on the radar. I wouldn't be looking to draft them as such, but yeah, maybe I'm just not as high on him for fancy wise.
Yeah, I think the thing mentioned. Do you mean streaming as in streaming him, or just streaming other quarterbacks?
Streaming quarterbacks. Yeah,
I was going to say I was like the word out. He
won't be streaming quarterbacks. That's what I mean. I'll be looking at.
I think me and you options. I think we're on the same wavelength there. To be honest, James, I actually don't disagree with Matt. I think that by the end of the year, Kyler Murray could well be in that top 3 quarterback discussion in that zone, and you will probably get the payout from him. However, personally, I don't really like going for the quarterback early. Dynasty is a bit different. So, like when we set up our Dynasty a year or so ago, I did go out and draft Mahomes high because I thought, I'm just going to get my guy and he's going to be there for a decade or whatever. So it changes with Dynasty, but for 1-year leagues, I don't personally. You would not find me going out and drafting a quarterback any higher than round 10 because I think you can get much better value leaving it late. I mean, you already said yourself, Jared Goff is going to be slipping, and he is taking a piece of that Rams offense. You're not going to complain if you get that in the 10th. Carson Wentz will be dropping. I've said it before when we did the Giants episode, but I think that Daniel Jones could end the year as a top 5 fantasy quarterback, and in a lot of drafts, he might even be going undrafted. So, personally, I would err towards what James is saying and kind of stay away from those top-end quarterbacks because I can find more points out of receivers and running backs at that stage. Yeah. But if you are someone who likes going out and getting a quarterback and the top 2 are off the board, then for me, once Jackson and Mahomes have gone, you're then into am I taking Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray as the next tier down, I think. Yeah.
I guess, it all comes down to your personal strategy and how you're looking to play the year and whatnot. But staying as well on the fantasy front, when we mentioned the running backs earlier, Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, and perhaps Benjamin in a dynasty rookie draft more than a regular season 1 year fantasy. But where do you rank those guys, and where do you reckon they will sort of tend to go in a normal fantasy draft?
I think Drake's gonna have a big year. I think if he can just play at the level he did last year for the entire for a consistent season and stay healthy, I think he'll earn himself that next contract there. which I think is another thing that I find. It's always I kind of quite like it in fantasy. Sometimes finding those players in a contract year, but it's that extra bit of motivation. It's like they're playing for something. They want to earn that contract. And I think as long as he stays healthy, I think if he's there, I think he's the kind of guy that's going to be going second round, maybe start the third and some if he slips. But that's the range he's going in drafts. Yeah. And I think he's one of those guys you can draft and stick in your lineup, and as long as he doesn't get injured, keep. But then if he does go down, you can get Chase Edmonds. I've got him in our dynasty. Played him a little bit here or there towards the end of last year. He's the guy. He's already proven he can come in and play at a good level, a productive fantasy level in that offense. So I think you could almost be safe if you want to take a risk and you're the kind of person who likes to handcuff really late on. Yeah. Grabbing the handcuff for yourself and just knowing that you're effectively running back 1 or 2 spot in your team, depending on how you draft, is secure for the year.
Yeah, I really like Kenyon Drake this year. Yeah. I think for a couple years there, while he was at Miami, he was not being utilised enough. I mean, you go back and he played in all 3 full seasons he played in Miami. He played 16 games, but his first season he only started 1. Second season, 2017, he only started 6, and his third season only started 7. Now, the number of carries he is being given on these seasons is minimal. Up to this point, he's played in 62 games in his career, but he's only got 450 carries. Compare that to someone like Zeke, who's getting 300 carries a year. This is a guy who's only 26 and has got less than 500 carries on his NFL career. So the body's going to be feeling good. I think he's finally in an offense that is going to be happy to turn around and give him those kind of carries. So I think the fact that you've finally got Kenyon Drake in an offense that is going to give him the opportunity to have this, and all the other stats that you want to see from a productive running back are there across his early seasons. I mean, you've got up here yards per carry, 5.4, 4.8, 4.5, 4.8. So he's never dropped below 4.5 yards a carry, which is great for a running back.
Very good,
if you then throw in that he's now getting 300 carries on a season, which I don't think he'll get that many, maybe 250 is more of a reasonable expectation. But because he went for 123 carries in 8 games with Arizona last year. So let's say 250-ish on the season. If he puts out numbers like that, he could be sneaking into that running back 1 territory.
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if he's not an RB1 by the end of this season. I think as long as he holds out and plays at the level he was, I think some other guys are going to have some pretty big seasons to knock him out of there. But I think he's one that if he can just keep it going, keep it consistent, no worries for, I think.
Yeah, definitely exciting times in Arizona as well. I know I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one plays out. However, I think that's all we've got time for today. So, of course, please be sure to check us out on YouTube. Go like, comment, and subscribe. Also, head over to Instagram. We're at the Brit Iron, and the same for Twitter as well. And also, we are setting up a listener league. So I know there's a few posts we put up on Instagram and Twitter. So if you just go there and check out what we're saying, it's basically comment below, like the post, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll be entered a draw with a chance of getting involved with the listener league, which I believe is end of July. We'll be
we're gonna do the draw at the end of July, and then from there we'll get in touch with everyone who's successful, and we'll set up a draft time and stuff like that. And then for the rest of the podcast throughout the year, we'll obviously be referring to that. So you might even get a shout out if you win it. So
exciting
fingers
times.
Crossed.
Oh.
You'll be famous.
Oh god. But yeah, so go check that out. Exciting times. So, but for today, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.